Hamas has called for changes to the latest version of a ceasefire plan, which has been backed by both the US and Israel. Al Jazeera has obtained the counter-proposal presented by Hamas late on Saturday. The draft includes a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza. Under the deal, 10 Israeli captives would be released in 3 stages. The bodies of 18 deceased captives would also be returned. Hamas's proposal would secure the unconditional entry of aid into Gaza through the UN and its agencies. It also states that negotiations on a permanent ceasefire would begin on day 1, and Hamas wants the Trump administration to guarantee the talks towards reaching a final settlement to the war. Well, Bassem Naim is the head of Hamas's political and international relations. He told Al Jazeera that the proposal the group discussed with the U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff is different to the one that was finally presented.
First of all, I think it is unfair and it is unjust to consider the opinion or the response of one party is the only negotiating proposal. We, 10 days ago or 1 week ago, we have agreed with Mr. Witkoff on one proposal, and he said this is acceptable. We can consider this a negotiating paper. He went to the other party, to the Israelis, to get their response. Instead of having a response to our proposal, he brought us a totally new proposal, a totally new response, which has nothing to do with what we have agreed upon with himself, which is not responding to the basics of our need. It is even not guaranteeing the 60 days temporary ceasefire. It is not guaranteeing the inflow of aid into Gaza. It is legitimizing the new proposal. It is legitimizing the Israeli plans to aid distribution. And at the end, there are no guarantees for negotiations to end with ending of the war or a permanent ceasefire and total withdrawal. They are talking only about redeployment of the Israeli forces inside the Gaza Strip, and we have also to negotiate from the beginning about the new redeployment plans within the 60 days.
Well, the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, has criticized Hamas's position. In a post on X, he said, "I received the Hamas response to the U.S. proposal. It is totally unacceptable and only takes us backwards." He says Hamas should accept the framework put forward as the basis for proximity talks. That is the only way, Witkoff maintains. A 60-day ceasefire deal will be agreed in the coming days, in which substantive negotiations can be held in good faith to try to reach a permanent ceasefire. Alan Fisher has more on Witkoff's comments from Washington, D.C.
Steve Witkoff's statement puts out a huge question now, which is, where does this go next? Certainly Donald Trump, speaking on Friday, suggested that he thought Hamas was on the verge of accepting the proposals that had been put forward, saying they were hoping to find a way out of what he described as this mess. And of course, in the past, he said if there wasn't a ceasefire deal and the release of captives pretty quickly, then there would be hell to pay. But many people will point to the fact that when Benjamin Netanyahu visited the White House, effectively Donald Trump gave him the green light to do whatever he wanted to do in Gaza. It seems that the phrase permanent ceasefire may have been a huge obstacle. Hamas wanted included in any agreement, the Israelis not so much. But also we know that there has been international criticism suggesting that rather than acting as an honest broker in this, the United States tends to favour what the Israelis want, aware that Benjamin Netanyahu is under pressure politically in Israel, because if he agrees to a deal that the far right wing of his coalition don't want to see, then there's every possibility that the government will collapse and there could be an election. And also there are those who suggest that Benjamin Netanyahu likes to continue the war because he feels it pushes away his legal problems that he's facing in Israel. So now we had the US say that they were prepared to walk away from the Russia-Ukraine talks. They were prepared to walk away from doing a deal with Iran on its nuclear program. The question is, now are the United States about to walk away from here? Donald Trump wants to be seen as a peacemaker. So that may be the small slither of hope here. But what is clear is there's not going to be any talks in the near future. and certainly no ceasefire in the coming days. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, joining us now on the News Hour to discuss these latest developments is Tamer Qarmout, Associate Professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Good to have you again with us, Tamer. First of all, what do you make of the intensification of Israeli attacks in Gaza, the targeting of these aid distribution sites, the AHF aid distribution sites, at the same time as Hamas is trying to see changes, renegotiate the ceasefire proposal that was presented to it by the Americans?
Folly, it's a very common behavior we have been witnessing from the Israelis. Every time there is a deadlock in the negotiation process, then Israel's heavy arm starts pushing on Gaza. They apply maximum pressure by targeting civilians via these death traps, what they call the humanitarian mechanisms, and it's just punishment. So basically what the Israelis are doing is, if Hamas is not compromising, then they're gonna massacre more Palestinians. And this has been the default, the modus apparatus of this conflict from the beginning. Civilians, going after civilians.
Right. But the interesting thing here is, and what we heard from Bassem Naim from Hamas, is that what they were talking about initially was different from what they were presented with. How do you explain that? And this Hamas counter proposal, what might it lead to? Could the Americans, because they want the Trump administration wants some sort of victory for itself, by reaching a ceasefire, could they push Israel to accept this counter proposal?
It's a very difficult question, Foley, because again, yes, if the Trump administration wants a victory, but at what expense? Who's going to pay the price? And basically, from what I see, the Americans and the Israelis are expecting the Palestinians to pay the price, as if they have not paid enough prices so far. This is not an army. Hamas is not an army. It's not a state. It's an ideology. It's a militia that follows certain tactics in warfare. The idea of seeing a general or a head of a state sitting in front of an Israeli official and surrendering will not happen, because this is a different war. This is a liberation war. So it's a no-go for Hamas ideologically. It will not surrender this way. But I think, and I believe, that Hamas is willing to look into dignified exits that preserve the minimum dignity of the Palestinian people. So it has not to be a zero-sum game from the Israeli-American perspective. They are still fixated on this zero-sum game approach to eliminate Hamas. And this is where we get to the deadlock. So yes, there is no incentives for Hamas, and all for the larger Palestinians as well, to go through these continuous negotiations where you still miss the key word, permanent ceasefire, to end this conflict. We don't see it anywhere in any document, and that's a problem.
When you look at what's happening on the ground in Gaza right now, especially in the last week with the setting up of this parallel aid mechanism, the GHF, what do you think Israel's broad military strategies are here? It's not just about feeding people, is it?
I think it's more. It's re-engineering Gaza. It's creating these new conditions of control. If I want to put it in a different way, it's bringing direct military occupation back into the Gaza Strip, and getting people used and familiar to it. And it sets a very dangerous stage. I think the Israelis have an appetite to stay in Gaza for a long time, for some foreseeable time, and occupy it, and then experiment with the people of Gaza, whether they will create governance structures that follow Israeli directives, or they themselves will govern Gaza the old ways when they were in control of Gaza. But obviously the Israelis are in this mood now, empowered by the Americans.
Thank you, Tamer. Always good to get your thoughts. Thank you very much for joining us on the News Hour. Tamer Qarmout from the Doha Institute of Graduate Studies.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.